Welcome, everybody. All right, let's see. There's a couple more people joining in. All right, I think we'll get started. But we're really excited. This is actually our first webinar that Avtech has hosted by ourselves. We've done a few others with some organizations like AACFB, but we're excited to provide more resources to our brokers and customers. So be patient with us. So this is our first one. And I think we can just go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, just admitting a few more people. Okay, the topic that we have is credit and leasing, what you need to know. And I just wanted to get started by introducing who we've got with us. We have Kevin Egbert. Kevin was Avtech's credit manager for several years, and now I think for the past 2 years, he's been our chief credit officer. So we're excited to have him. This is his first webinar, I believe. Is that right?
It is.
And
yeah.
Awesome. And then Rick Roberts. Rick might be a little bit more of a familiar face. Rick is one of our senior account managers, and so he manages a lot of our broker relationships. You may have seen him on our social media and at conferences and things like that. So we're excited to have him with us here today as well. And then my name is Autumn. I'm just going to be moderating this, kind of directing questions and whatnot. I manage our brand and partnerships. So broker partners, vendor partners, the marketing materials for those. And that being said, everyone is going to be muted, but we do encourage questions. So in the chat, just throughout, if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat, and then we will direct them at the end to either Kevin or Rick, whether they're about Avtech or whatnot. And I think we can get started with Rick. He's going to talk about the advantages of leasing.
Cool. Excuse me. I'm battling a bit of a cold right now, so I don't sound very good, but I will do my best. Thanks, Autumn, for putting this together. Yeah, we're trying some new things as a company. One thing we wanted to do is a webinar. This one today is just, I'm going to talk for just a couple of minutes about my favorite benefits of leasing, things that I discuss with brokers, vendors, chief financial officers, as I encounter opportunities to provide financing solutions to companies. This is not comprehensive. There are a lot of benefits of leasing. I would just like to touch on a high level, my three favorite, and hopefully it can be of benefit to you, whether you're a sales professional, whether you're a vendor, whether you're a broker or a business owner. I think these advantages should be considered. And so, yeah, thanks for putting these slides together, Autumn. They look really good. So on this first slide, you'll see, I think the biggest advantage to financing or leasing is it allows a company to acquire equipment without a large investment, without a large capital expense. Often with bank financing, even some captive bank financing, companies are required to put sometimes a significant down payment in place. With leasing, we typically are looking at 100% financing for the equipment. Very minimal initial expenses with leasing. So it allows a company to acquire equipment without hitting their cash reserves. I guess I just talked about number two there. number one. So a huge advantage of leasing equipment is that payments are spread out over multiple years. And the lease expense becomes a fixed monthly line item, which allows companies to just maintain a steady cash flow, adequately budget for the future. I think, and Kevin might speak to this later in his portion as he talks about credit, but I've noticed that credit analysts and credit committees, they like it when companies have liquidity and some cash reserves. They like it when a company is in a position from a cash perspective to manage volatility in the industry or with their company. And so when you finance or lease equipment, you can preserve that capital. You can use it in ways that are more beneficial, like hiring new employees, stocking inventory, expanding a facility, things of that nature. So very small initial expenditures with leasing, conserving cash with leasing. And then this point number 3 here on this slide, just flexible budgeting. When you have a fixed payment, it allows you to know what you have in front of you. Stay agile, stay ready. I like those. It's so in summary here for slide number 1, preserving cash, avoiding large upfront investments. Leasing, financing can help you budget and keep cash flow available for other expenditures. Leases offer stability with their fixed payment terms. The second this is my favorite advantage to leasing or benefit of leasing, is leasing is not designed to be a one size fits all. One of my favorite things about working here at Avtech Capital is our creativity. We can tailor a leasing solution to fit the need of the company. We can offer terms as short as 12 months, as long as 60 months. Sometimes we've done 72 or 84 months. Those are a little bit more rare. Most of our transactions are 3 to 5 year terms. I like that we can write leases that are fully amortizing. We can write leases with fair market value residuals or a hybrid of the two. We can write leases with very specific residual buyouts. I love that a company has the ability to, at the end of the lease term, purchase the equipment, or they can renew the lease, they can extend the lease, they can return the equipment. The idea there is to tailor a financing solution that matches the operational needs of a business. And so this is my favorite aspect of our business, is working with a chief financial officer or business owner that allows them to cater to their needs as a company with regards to the equipment. It allows them to adapt. So at the end of the term, you can kind of select your own path. You can decide what you want to do with the equipment. I also love, I guess this speaks to what I was talking about a moment ago. We can often finance not just the equipment cost, but we can often include additional costs, things like freight or transportation of the equipment, installation costs, training costs, prepaid maintenance programs on the equipment. I love our ability to not just finance the hard costs of a capital project, but also to include some of those softer costs that in many cases can be significant. Now there's a lot of complex technology implementations that sometimes can be unpredictable. And I like that we can include some of these soft costs into our financing. I love just the tailored solution approach to leasing. And then, thank you for this disclaimer, Autumn. So yes, I'm not a CPA. I'm not an attorney. However, there are tax advantages to not only acquiring equipment with things like depreciation and bonus depreciation, but there are significant tax incentives when it comes to financing and leasing. And I would encourage any chief financial officer, any business owner to work closely with their CPA to maximize any potential tax incentives, tax credits that are available, because there are many. And as it says here, lease payments are often fully deductible as business expenses. The goal there being reducing taxable income. And so these are just a few things that I find I discuss a lot with brokers that I work with vendors, with chief financial officers. And these are significant advantages that should not be overlooked. And so these are my favorite. There's many others. If we had more time, this webinar is designed to be shorter. But these are my three favorites, and hope that as you work, if you're in this industry, as you work with companies, that these are things that you should discuss and counsel with and find the best solution for the company as it relates to acquiring new equipment.
Thanks, Rick. I think that is a great segue into what Kevin wanted to talk to us about, which is the 5 C's of credit. So we'll just pass it over to you, Kevin.
Awesome. Thanks, Autumn, and thanks, Rick. So yeah, excited to be with everybody today. Appreciate everybody taking a little bit of time out of their day to join us for this webinar. As Autumn mentioned, it's my first time doing a webinar, so we'll see how it goes. But again, yeah, just appreciate everybody being here. So I'm gonna just briefly speak on the 5 C's of credit, which really the goal is to just provide some insight into the credit process, how transactions get looked at on the credit side of things. So I guess to start off, credit risk is the chance of not receiving money back in a timely manner and as agreed. So credit departments are set up to evaluate the risk that exists within a specific transaction and really ultimately answer the question of whether that transaction, whether that deal is a good deal or a bad deal. So the 5 C's help provide a little bit of insight into how that question gets evaluated and answered through the credit process. So the 5 C's are cash flow, capital, character, collateral, and conditions. So the first C that Autumn's pulled up here is cash flow. So this is really evaluating what the borrower's ability is to pay us back. So the income statement of cash flows are looked at pretty heavily to answer that question. So we're really looking at how profitable is the company, and are they making enough money to service their debt obligations, including the lease payments that will be added on, assuming the transaction that's being reviewed gets approved and ultimately funded. The next C, capital, which kind of ties into the last one as well, in the sense that it involves the review of the financial statements. So what's being looked at here is the balance sheet, and what we're trying to evaluate within this C is, does the borrower have sufficient balance sheet or credit strength to withstand, I know the slide says economic challenges, and that's definitely one thing that gets looked at, but economic challenges, do they have the wherewithal to continue operating if they lose a significant customer, or if a pandemic pops up, which obviously that impacted a lot of companies. So things like that. And yeah, we're looking at, like I said, the balance sheet. So how much leverage does the company have? How much equity does the company have, which tells you how much money they've made historically, and how much, or whether the owners have left that money in the company, and just how much capital the owners have invested in the business. We obviously like to see that that ownership has some skin in the game, right? The next C is character. So character refers to a borrower's reputation and performance on past financial obligations. So through this process, we answer the question of, can we trust this borrower? Are they going to be good to work with? Are they a bad actor? Things like that. So there's a few different things that we look at to help evaluate that. We run background checks on the company and any owners that hold over 20% of the company. And that'll tell us if the company or the owners have any material suits, liens, judgments, any past run-ins with the law, historical bankruptcies, things like that, that'll help us get a feel for whether they're going to be good to work with ultimately. And then we also run D&B and PayNet reports, which tell us how the company is paying its trades and its creditors. And then personal credit reports if there is a PG on the transaction. The next C is collateral. So collateral is definitely important, but at Avtech, we're definitely more of a cash flow lender, so we put a little less emphasis on what the collateral is specifically. As Rick mentioned when he was talking, we can include things like freight expenses, installation expenses in our financing. And beyond that, we can just generally finance much softer collateral than your typical bank or your typical lender. So we can finance things like software, tenant improvements, signage, and other things of that nature. So while the collateral doesn't play as big of a role, it definitely still plays a role in our underwriting. So typically, if we've got softer collateral, we're going to try to get a shorter term on the transaction. And really, the reason behind that, and I guess the reason that's or the question that's being addressed with this C is what is the, if we have to repossess equipment, what is the value of that equipment going to be on the secondary market, right? So if we're financing things that don't hold their value or don't really have any value on the secondary market, we're typically going to look to have a quicker payback period. And if it's stronger collateral, you know, like your construction, your manufacturing, medical, things like that, then we're going to be more open to a longer term. And that being said, if we're looking at a deal for softer collateral, but the company has strong cash flow, they have a strong balance sheet and good backing, we may be willing to give them a longer term on soft collateral when we typically wouldn't. So, and that's just to show that everything kind of plays a role there, right? A lot of moving parts that get looked at and evaluated as a part of that.
Kevin, can I add something real quick?
Yeah, please.
I've noticed working here, and Kevin is great at this, that if we like the performance of the company, we can often tailor our financing solution kind of regardless, or I guess what people say now is irregardless, but regardless of the economic useful life of the asset, if we really like the underlying company and its financial performance, we can often do a longer term than what might normally be required for that type of equipment. So I just kind of insert that there, that to speak to your point that while collateral isn't the main focus, it can influence the term, but also if the company has a solid reputation and a great credit worthiness, we can often stretch that tailored solution beyond even the more traditional economic useful life. So just a little additional insight I've noticed over the years.
For sure. Yeah, thanks, Rick. So the last C is conditions, and there's a few things that roll into this. So just overall transaction terms, really here we're also looking at the global economic conditions that exist at the time, the specific industry that the company operates within. So, and then yeah, the purpose of the financing or lease transaction. So we look at whether the company is purchasing equipment that's going to bring additional revenue and additional cash flow to the business, or whether they're monetizing assets that are already owned free and clear. Both things that we can look at, but things that get looked at and evaluated as a part of this process. And then, so with going back and tying into the industry item, so there's a lot of lenders out there that won't touch certain industries, right? We don't have that here at Avtech. We can look at any industry. There are industries that will be looked at a little closer that are maybe on kind of the more alternative, volatile, speculative side of things, like your oil and gas, your transportation, you know, crypto, all that type of stuff. There's several industries like that out there, and definitely industries that we can still look at, but that we may look for some additional strength in those other C's to get us comfortable. And as Rick mentioned, it kind of ties back into the same thing that he mentioned. Even if it's a tougher industry, a tougher economic conditions aren't great at the time, if the company's performing, the company does well, we can usually figure something out. And so just to wrap things up, there's several things that get looked at and evaluated as a part of the credit process. Every lender has different credit policies and credit parameters that they're looking to, fit deals inside of when they look at a deal. And every lender is going to weight these 5 C's differently in their scoring model. But one of the things I love working at Avtech, which actually is pretty similar to what Rick likes, is just our ability to be creative. So we're an independent, so we have the ability to be flexible when it comes to getting a deal done. And we can mitigate things in different ways, to mitigate risk where a company may have some weaknesses or where it makes sense to ultimately figure out how to get a deal done and get a deal done that works for both parties, right? There's always a little bit of give and take, but we obviously need something that makes sense for Avtech based on our credit policies and parameters and our risk appetite. And at the same time, we want it to make sense for the customer and be beneficial for the customer. So anyways, hopefully I didn't take up too much time there, but obviously a lot to cover, and it's kind of a broad topic, but hopefully that provides some insight into that process and how we look at transactions.
Thanks, Kevin, and thank you, Rick. I think it's really helpful to see both the sales perspective and the underwriting perspective. I wanted to just use these last few minutes. We don't have much time left, but just to go over a few questions. It looks like we have one question. I'll direct to either of you. What is the maximum amount that Avtech will fund a customer?
Do you want me to take that one, Rick?
What's the biggest deal we've done, Kevin? I know we've done deals in the $20 million range, or is it I'm trying to think the largest deal I've ever done.
The biggest individual lease schedule that we've financed was just under 11 million.
Okay.
But in terms of one specific customer, I mean, we'll fund several lease schedules for a specific customer, right? And I think the biggest, if you were to add all the schedules together, largest amounts probably around 30 million.
Okay.
But we definitely have the ability to go beyond that where it makes sense. We obviously fund and hold as much as possible on our own balance sheet, but we've got other partners that we can bring in to partner on that we work with closely and regularly, that we can partner on transactions with. So we don't have a set maximum, but yeah, we've got the ability to do large deals.
Michael Kadinsky just put in the chat that we funded one of his clients last year for right about 10 million. So probably the useful answer to that question is most of our transactions fall in the $500,000 to $5 million range. Most of our deals. We will do deals as small as 250,000, and we can do big ticket as well, 10 million plus, up to 30 million for that client that Kevin was referencing. But the vast majority of our transactions typically fall in that 500,000 to $5 million range, I think.
I think we've got one last question. It was asked pretty early on in the webinar. How is that different than what a bank would do? And I think it was based on the timing of when that was submitted. I think it was when, Rick, you were talking about conserving cash, spreading out costs, preserving capital, budgeting, things like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not maybe, let's see. So banks do similar to what we do. They write loans typically. Some banks can write leases. Um, I think the point I was trying to make is most banks will require a down payment. They want day one loan to value, which would mean that a company needs to come up with 10 or 15 or 20% down, whatever is required. I think what I was trying to highlight there is most of what we do is 100% financing. So yeah. Oh, here's some additional question. The question is, how do you spread out payments different than a bank would do? Again, our ability to be creative. We've done deals where we have traditional monthly payments. That's a lot of what we do. We've also done like quarterly billing deals, semi-annual billing deals, seasonal payments. I've looked at, Kevin, we had a deal we were working on recently that had step-up payments, where the customer said, this is how I need the payment schedule to work over the next 5 years. I need my payments in year one to be this, my payments in year two to be this. And we can do those kinds of things. We can approach that. So whether it's vanilla, like a bank, they're less creative, I think, than we are, or whether it's hyper specific to a step up payment plan or a step down payment plan or seasonality to payments. That's where I think we can differentiate ourselves from traditional regulated banks.
And I think just real quick, one of the areas where we really differentiate ourselves, I would say, is kind of as we discussed on the collateral side. I mean, we're willing to do a lot of collateral that your traditional bank doesn't want to touch or doesn't want to deal with. And then just on the credit side, we're not typically looking at your perfect, pristine credits. And so just getting creative, as Rick mentioned, we can do a lot of different things to structure transactions or enhance transactions to make them work, where there may be pressure points or there may be reasons why a bank doesn't want to.
I've got two other questions. These larger deals, I think referring to 8, 10, $50 million transactions, how do you structure them, EFA/FMB?
That's a great question. I like to follow the lead of the customer. The customer usually knows what works best for their equipment that they're acquiring, but also for their business. So we can write any type of lease that exists, and we can write equipment finance agreements as well. So we can structure a deal as a fair market value lease. We can structure the deal as an equipment finance agreement. I typically like to follow the lead of the customer and try to provide the solution that they're looking for, is typically what we like to do.
Question about rates. How competitive are you with traditional big banks?
I mean, I'll start off by saying we're obviously not a bank. So we're probably not going to be the cheapest lender in town, but we are able to offer a lot of different options as we've discussed. So really it's going to depend on the credit profile and the risk profile of the company and what that looks like. But I mean, we can offer rates anywhere from, what would you say, Rick? I mean, it's around the I would probably say currently around 8%. I mean, and then upwards from there, again, just depending on what the risk profile of the transaction looks like based on those 5 C's that we discussed.
Yeah, that's a great question. Traditional big banks, sometimes they have great rates, sometimes they're more expensive. I work with several brokers that are in the small business arena. An SBA loan right now is like 11.5%. So I guess it just depends on what you're after there. Like Kevin said, our rates probably start right around prime right now. In some cases, we can get a little sharper than that. Might be able to get, yeah, about 8% is probably where we're starting. I've noticed that most of our deals in the current rate environment that we're all dealing with, effective to the customer, are going to be in that 8 to 10, 8 to 12 range. So a lot of big banks, that's kind of what we're seeing from them as well. Some, if they've got you, if they've got a secured credit facility, blanket filing on all the assets of the business, maybe they can get a little bit sharper than that. But I actually think we can compete very well with traditional big banks, and I always like the opportunity to do so. I always like to see what their current borrowing rate is and get as close as possible to that as we can. The world of lending money is a competitive world, and we understand that, and we're good at that.
And just to add on a little bit, the nice thing is coming to Avtech, you won't have to deal with covenants. And as Rick mentioned earlier, we're willing to advance 100% of equipment cost, where a lot of banks aren't, or aren't always willing to. So there's definitely advantages and things that, differentiate us from your traditional banks.
Okay, I think this will be our last question, and then we can close up. Where do you get your money from?
So we've got a strong balance sheet. So a lot of the transactions we do on our balance sheet, which is great. Avtech's been in business for a little over 20 years, and we're set up very well to be able to decision and fund transactions on our own. We do have some other capital, or access to other capital partners that we will involve and use at times. But yeah, we've got a strong balance sheet, and we're better set up now than we ever have been to fund transactions. And yeah, we appreciate all the business that the brokers bring to Avtech, and want to do as much as we can.
Awesome. All right, I know we have gone a little over 10 minutes over, but thank you, Rick. Thank you, Kevin. I think this has been really helpful, and thank you to everybody that joined. We will have a recording for this. I'm happy to send it out to anybody. We'll be putting it on our website under our broker program page, where we're going to have several different, it's like a little learning library where we'll have more of these videos every quarter, different topics that we'll cover. And if there's any other questions, feel free to direct them to myself or Rick. And thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Kevin. Thanks, Autumn.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.